There's a weird thing going on with Conor McGregor and USADA. Pull up the tweets if we can. Listen to what Aaron says. Quote, after cross-referencing the entire... I can't... Go full screen on this if you can for just a second. I want to read this off the screen if I can. After cross-referencing the entire active UFC roster with USADA's athlete test history database, I found that Conor McGregor was the lone active fighter, aside from athletes who signed, for example, after August 1st, to not be tested by USADA. I think we have another tweet or two if you want to put that up here real quickly. Let's take a look at it. According to the UFC's anti-doping policy, the only way McGregor would be exempt from testing would be if his UFC contract was terminated or he provided the UFC with a written notice that he was retiring. But as he notes, he is currently ranked 11th and is in the lightweight rankings, and to our knowledge, has not retired. By the way, there's a little bit more to it than just that. There was a statement from USADA. Let me read this here. This is just a part of the statement that USADA gave to Aaron Bronsteter. Quote, unless they notify the UFC their retirement, their contract is terminated, or they otherwise removed from the program, there's language in there, then of course they would be tested. Listen to that. Or they otherwise were removed from the program. BC, what is otherwise removed from the program? Here's my question about this. I would love to get an answer. Why can't we get a straight answer about this from USADA, right? The whole idea about anti-doping is that we're the adults in the room. And if you're going to be the adults in the room and you've got this database where you can see who was tested, how many times, and what kind of quadrant of the year, right? Why can't they give a straight answer? And what the fuck does it mean otherwise removed from the program? Does that mean there's actually another carve-out that exists that they haven't mentioned where you're not retired, you haven't been moved from the rankings or the way in which he had indicated with the previous tweet, but you could still not be part of the testing program and still be active on the roster? Is there another carve-out? And if so, why aren't we being told about this? What do you make of this whole situation?
Yeah. All right. Luke, I do always want to remind when talking about USADA in general that USADA was in boxing before it came to the UFC. And Thomas Hauser, the Boxing Hall of Fame writer, has done extensive research behind the scenes on USADA's history in boxing, in which, hundreds or thousands, whatever the amount of tests that they did over almost a decade time as the preferred go-to testing body in major boxing. One positive test came through. Eric Morales against Danny Garcia in their rematch in 2012. And it was only because it got leaked and pushed. And oh, by the way, even though Morales failed both of his samples for clenbuterol, he was still allowed to fight that weekend. So if you come from boxing like I do, you never had a ton of respect for USADA being overly legitimate. In fact, promoters went out of their way to use USADA rather than the cheaper VADA at the time, which was an independent voluntary situation with 24/7 testing that did deeper testing. So you use that as the foundation, and then you go over UFC's history with USADA, during which, Luke, it seemed like a strategic hire to join up to remove the reputation of people using it within the sport, maybe ahead of the big sale in 2016, or just at least to provide them with a, well, hey, we tested them and USADA's legit. It's not our fault type of response if they need it. I get that. But we've already seen them, Luke, do somewhat unprecedented moves like move the John Jones-Gustafsson rematch during Christmas week to another state, and then change the ruling where positive tests are no longer going to go public, so the whole picogram thing could be going on with every fighter on the card and we wouldn't even notice. And oh, by the way, you remember in 2016 when Brock Lesnar was going to come back at UFC 200 and the UFC and USADA waived that rule that said you had to be in the testing pool for 6 months before coming back? So why does Conor have different circumstances? Why are more and more of these things being pushed, under cloak and dagger? You tell me, Luke. Okay? You tell me.
I want to read that statement one more time because I kind of butchered it a little bit here. Here's the full one. I'm going to answer your question. Once UFC athletes are enrolled in the testing program, they are subject to testing even when not competing. By the way, Chris Weidman's not competing. He's been tested 4 times. Unless they notify the UFC of their retirement, their contract is terminated, or they otherwise are removed from the program. What the fuck does that last one mean? otherwise? Well, okay, what would it mean to be otherwise removed if your contract's not terminated and you've not indicated you want to retire?
Maybe it means you're a celebrity who's been in the weight room like crazy lately, posing in front of a mirror with a phone.
This sounds like I'm going after Conor McGregor. I don't give a shit what Conor McGregor does. Like, whatever he wants to do in his off time.
Spoiler alert. Luke would approve him using right now. Spoiler alert.
It doesn't bother me at all. I think largely this is all kabuki theater, and people have been led to believe a bunch of Nancy Reagan war on drugs bullshit. And by the way, I've had people write me being like, I'm so tired of hearing your views. Boy, if you're tired of hearing my views, you should know how I feel, where I have to hear this inundated fucking tsunami every day of clean sport and dirty sport, and we're trying to take care of sport. What a fucking bunch of nonsense that I'm subjected to over and over and over and over again. Here's what it comes down to. USADA needs to say whether or not carve-outs specifically exist outside of contract termination, outside of retirement, and whether or not Conor McGregor is part of that. This whole bullshit, we don't comment on the testing pool status of any particular athlete. What a fucking dodge. You need to be, if you want anybody to trust this bullshit, and I want to be very clear, I do not. But for all of the suckers out there who bought into this nonsense, they are owed, at a bare minimum, a degree of transparency. Are there carve-outs? By what means do they happen? Are you just making it up as you go? Want to put that out there.
Yeah, I think the latter's correct. I think some of it is making it up as you go. All I'm saying is it's not a good look. We're not trying to, bring down any ships. We're trying to be the media.